All right, Walter Wofford here, Jackson, Mississippi, short-term rental operator. So I have been using seller financing since 1981. Put a little clock on that one. The first 17 houses I bought starting in 1981 were all seller financing. Why? Because that's the only way I could afford to buy them. And so what I typically did was to go to someone who was renting their house and ask them if they'd like to continue receiving the income from the property in a way of a note rather than the rent, give up on the tenants. And I was successful at getting other people to do that. So I bought 3 or 4 primary residences over this time. I bought an office building. I bought several short-term rentals using seller financing techniques. And so I want to be able to show you the exact contract that I used to buy my office building. And that was about 10 years ago. But we have the 8 essential clauses. You got to know what you want before you go into a negotiation. And this is, I came up with my 8. So there you go. So if you like this series, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like, and there'll be more coming at you. But wait, we got my AI team ready to deliver the content in just a minute. They're going to do all the heavy lifting.
So if you'd like a copy of my ebook entitled Profit Powered Hostings, How to Run a Short-Term Rental Business Using RelayFi, just pull out your camera and put it up to the QR code and enter your information, and you'll immediately receive the ebook. All right, thank you.
Today we're really digging into a strategy for buying property that, well, it can be super powerful. Seller financing.
That's right. It's basically cutting out the middleman, the bank, and making a direct deal with the seller. They become your lender, in effect.
And we've got some great material to work with here. Some excerpts from an Article 8, Must-Have Clauses When Negotiating to Buy with Seller Financing by Walter Wofford.
Yeah, and crucially, also a central contract. A real-world example for a property that shows how these clauses actually look when they're written down.
Exactly. So our goal today is to unpack these must-have clauses, understand why they matter so much for you, the buyer.
And then see how they play out in that sample agreement. It makes it much more concrete.
So the big question we're tackling for you is, if you're looking at a seller financing deal, what terms are absolutely essential? What do you need to understand and probably fight for?
Okay, so first off, let's just quickly define seller financing based on the source. It's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, the seller agrees to sell, the buyer agrees to buy, all based on terms in a contract.
And the key is the seller provides the financing, not a bank.
Got it. And this article we have identifies 8 specific things a buyer should really focus on, calls them must-have clauses.
Right. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They fundamentally shape the deal for the buyer, the financials, the legal safety net, basically whether it's a good deal or not.
Okay, let's jump into the list. First one, the source highlights. Payment amount that the house and/or occupant can afford. Why start there?
Well, it sounds obvious, but it's critical. It's all about making sure the deal is sustainable long-term. If the monthly payment is too high for your budget, or if it's an investment property and the rent won't cover the payment, plus, taxes, insurance, repairs.
Then you're underwater from day one.
Exactly. An unaffordable payment just sets you up to default. So nailing down a realistic payment is foundational. Must have number 1.
Makes total sense. Okay, number 2, significant down payment. Now wait, isn't seller financing sometimes about lower down payments? Why is a significant flagged here?
That's a really good point. Seller financing can be flexible, but the source frames a significant down payment as a key negotiating point for the buyer.
How so?
Because putting more skin in the game, a larger down payment, it drastically lowers the seller's risk. They see you're serious, you're committed.
Ah, okay. And that lower risk for them.
Gives you leverage to ask for other important things on this list, like maybe a better interest rate or that non-recourse clause we'll get to.
Got it. So the down payment isn't just cash out. It's a bargaining chip for other favorable terms. Clever. Okay. Number 3, below market interest rate. That sounds fantastic, but is it always achievable? Why a must-have?
Well, must-have maybe in the sense of this is a primary goal of pursuing seller financing. You're often doing this because you hope to beat the bank's rates.
Right.
Getting a rate even slightly below market saves you money every single month, and a lot over the life of the loan. It's a core financial benefit you're aiming for. So yeah, the source says push for it. It's a key win.
Definitely a huge plus if you can negotiate that. All right, number 4 sounds really important. Non-recourse. Break that down for us. What does non-recourse mean, and why is it so essential?
This is huge. Non-recourse means if things go south, if you default on the loan, the only thing the seller can come after is the property itself, the collateral.
So they can take the house back.
But they can't touch your other assets. Your personal savings, your car, other properties, none of that. The debt is secured only by that specific property.
Wow. Okay, that really limits your personal financial risk beyond the property itself. I can see why that's a must-have.
Absolutely critical protection for the buyer.
Okay, number 5. Moratorium on payments. Sounds like taking a breather.
Exactly that. It means after you close on the property, there's a set period, maybe a few months before your first actual loan payment is due.
And why is that pause so valuable?
Breathing room, maybe the property needs repairs before you can rent it out, or maybe you just want time to build up a cash reserve before those payments start hitting. It's a buffer. The source flags it as a must-have for that flexibility right after closing.
Yeah, I can see that being incredibly helpful, especially if you need to get the property generating income first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 6. Take title in a land trust. This one's about structure. Why is how you own the property a must-have?
So the source specifically mentions using a land trust. Now, it doesn't go into exhaustive detail, but land trusts are often used for a few key reasons. Privacy is a big one.
Okay.
Sometimes it makes transferring ownership easier down the road. And importantly, it often connects back to that non-recourse idea. The trust is the borrower, not you personally.
Ah, so the entity structure itself helps achieve other goals, like limiting personal liability.
Precisely. It's often part of a larger strategy.
Interesting. Number 7, inspection contingency. This feels, pretty standard for any real estate deal. Why call it out specifically for seller financing?
It is standard, but you absolutely cannot skip it or water it down. The source emphasizes you must have the right, written into the contract, to get a thorough inspection after you've agreed on a price.
And crucially, the right to walk away. To avoid the contract, get your deposit back if the inspection turns up major issues you didn't expect and aren't willing to handle.
So no matter how good the financing terms look, you need that escape hatch based on the property's actual condition.
Absolutely non-negotiable. You need to know what you're truly buying.
Makes sense. Okay, last one, number 8. Right of first refusal to purchase the note created. What's this about?
This is interesting. It means if the seller, who is holding your loan, decides later on they want to sell that loan, that promissory note, to someone else, like an investor.
You get the first shot at buying it.
Exactly. You, the buyer-borrower, get the first opportunity to buy your own debt back, usually matching whatever offer the seller received.
Why is that a benefit? Control. Maybe the seller wants to cash out and is willing to sell the note at a discount. This gives you the chance to potentially pay off your loan early, maybe for less than face value, if the opportunity arises. It keeps options open for you.
Okay, that's a really solid list of 8 points. It paints a clear picture of what a buyer should be looking for.
Definitely. And the source material helps even more by giving us that sample contract. For a real property, 775E fortification in Jackson, Mississippi.
Right, this is where we see Siri neat practice. How these clauses actually get written into the legal document.
Yeah, it makes it much easier to visualize.
Okay, looking at the contract parties, seller is John Wick.
And the buyer, this is interesting, is Acorn Financial Trust, Will Jones, trustee. And the source text literally points out right there, take title in a land trust.
Ah, so there's clause #6 right on the first page. The buyer is a trust.
It shows that structural choice right away.
Okay, let's look at the price and terms. Purchase price, $135,000.
Down payment, $25,000 cash at closing. Again, the source annotation explicitly calls this a significant down payment. So there's clause #2 in action.
Seller finances the rest, $110,000.
And the payments, 120 monthly payments. That's 10 years of $10,062.17.
And the source notes this specific amount is the payment amount that the house and or occupant can afford, tying back to clause #1.
Yeah, then the interest rate, 3%.
Which the source highlights as below market interest rate. That's clause #3.
And check this out. Payment start date beginning 4 months after closing.
There's our moratorium on payments, clause #5, built right in. 4 months of breathing room.
See, right there in the core financial terms, we've hit on clauses 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 is covered by the buyer entity itself.
That's incredibly clear. It shows how these aren't just abstract ideas. They translate directly into numbers and dates in the contract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now look at how the loan is secured, the deed of trust mortgage section.
Okay, it says the deed of trust is the sole security for the promissory note.
And then the promissory note itself is specifically labeled non-recourse.
There's clause #4, explicitly stated.
And the contract even explains why in this specific case. It says, the trust-taking title is a retirement account, and the IRS rules don't allow the IRA nor its owner to guarantee loans.
That's fascinating. So the buyer's structure, using an IRA and a trust, basically mandated the non-recourse term.
Seems like it. And it reinforces the point. The property is the sole collateral for the debt. Crystal clear non-recourse.
Very cool connection. It also mentions the seller being named lost payee on insurance, which is standard lender protection.
Right. And then further down, there's a whole clause titled right of first refusal.
Okay. And it says, yes, if the seller offers the note for sale, the maker borrower, that's the buyer's trust, gets the first right to purchase it.
Spelling out clause #8, exactly as discussed, gives the buyer that potential future control.
Okay. The contract also covers the usual stuff: warranty deed, closing costs split, $1,000 estimate, attorney Bill Smith, buyer pays for title insurance if they want it, possession at closing, prorated taxes, the nuts and bolts.
Standard stuff. But then you get to the inspections clause. This is where clause #7, the inspection contingency, really comes alive.
Right. It does say the offer is as is, seller makes no warranties.
But crucially, the buyer gets 10 days from the contract execution date to do their inspection. That's the window.
And they have to tell the seller the result within those 10 days.
And here's the key part, the teeth. If it is approved, a closing date will be scheduled. If not approved, buyer and seller agree that this contract is null and void.
There it is, the out. If the inspection isn't satisfactory, the deal's off.
That's the non-negotiable protection.
Yeah.
And notice it also says the seller has to provide access with utilities unnecessary for a proper inspection.
Seeing that null and void language really underscores why that contingency is so critical. Okay, the excerpt wraps up mentioning personal property removal and setting the closing date,
which is tied directly to the inspection, on or before 10 days after the removal of the inspection's contingency.
Makes sense. And there's one final note at the bottom about the trustee's liability.
Yeah, it explicitly says Will Jones signs not personally, but as trustee, and has no personal liability.
Which ties back again to using the trust clause #6 and reinforces the non-recourse nature clause #4. It all fits together.
It really does. It shows how these clauses work together to create a specific protected structure for the buyer.
So let's bring this back to the listener. After breaking down these clauses and seeing them in a real contract example, what's the big takeaway for someone considering seller financing?
I think the main thing is it demystifies the process. It shows you the specific language, the specific terms you need to be aware of, and frankly, negotiate for. It's not just about the price.
It's about the terms, the interest rate, the payment schedule, the non-recourse protection, the inspection rights.
Exactly. Those details define whether it's actually a good deal for you. Seeing them in the sample contract gives you concrete examples of what to look for, what to ask your attorney about.
Gives you a practical checklist almost, a vocabulary to use when you're looking at an offer or making one.
Precisely. It helps you understand the levers you can pull and the protections you absolutely need to have in place. It empowers you as a buyer in these non-traditional deals.
Okay, so we've really unpacked those 8 must-have clauses for buyers using seller financing, things like affordable payments, non-recourse debt, inspection rights.
And we saw how several of them were woven directly into that sample contract for the Jackson property, showing how they translate into real-world deal points.
Understanding these specific contract terms really is the key to making seller financing work effectively and safely from the buyer's side.
Couldn't agree more. The details matter immensely.
All right, let's leave you with a final thought, building on what we've discussed. Considering the specifics we saw in that sample contract, like the precise 10-day inspection window with the null and void option, and how the buyer's IRA in a trust structure dictated the non-recourse term, what does this really tell you about the critical importance of getting tailored legal advice? Advice that understands your specific financial situation, your goals, and the unique aspects of the property before you commit to any seller financing agreement.